All right, hello gamers, Muckluck here, and we are back with our tour through all of the boon-giving DPS supports in Guild Wars 2. Today, we were learning about the DPS alacrity providing Scourge. Now, Scourge is more known for being the heal alac provider, meaning it does the healing and stuff for the group, and the DPS alac Scourge actually seems to be kind of lesser known. There was less guides on this than any of the others that I had done so far. So like when I checked the usual websites, I only found a couple of them rather than finding one on every single website that I would compare them to. On that note, so according to that guide, we are running partially Ritualist gear. So I've got Ritualist right here, Viper over here, and Viper over here. Scepter Torch with a pistol on the main hand there that we weapon swap to, so the torch is always in our offhand. Rune of the Trapper, Sigil of Bursting and Torment, and Bursting again. So Bursting is always on our main hand, and then Torment is always in the offhand. This is the build right here. If you play many Condi Necro builds, these two trait lines are almost always the same. For example, when I last did a Necro video, it was Condi Harbinger, and these two trait lines were identical to this one. We just changed the Scourge trait line. And then we got this stuff up here. However, this is what's crazy. This and this and this can be changed to what you need depending on the fight, which is really wild. You have a lot of flexibility with your utility slots and stuff up here. So how does this build work? As I always say, the job of this class can be divided up into two aspects. Aspect one is providing the boon that you are responsible to, which makes your whole group much stronger. In this case, that is alacrity. Job two is as much damage as possible after you've done job one. So how does a Scourge provide alacrity to its team? Well, because of this trait, every time you give barrier to your team, you give a small amount of alacrity. Now, what skills do we have that provide barrier? Skill 1, when you spawn a shade, which is like a little power totem thing, it does barrier for a second when it spawns. So if you look at my buff bar down here, as I spawn the shade, there's alacrity. Second thing is every time we hit the F3, barrier will pulse from me and my shades, but it is stronger if you have a shade out. I should go ahead and mention this if you've never played Scourge before. There's a lot of things that give a lot of bonuses as long as you have one shade on the field. You can count how many shades you have on the field with this little thing right here. As long as one of these pips are colored in, you are good to press your buttons and get these bonuses, like for example 225 concentration and expertise. So you want to always make sure you have at least one shade out before you mash the other function keys. And then what else we got? We got Sandstorm Shroud in this build, which will do this yellow circle. You're the only one who sees it, and it builds up and then does a big boom and does alacrity. Also throws out some protection, so you'll be helping with prot uptime on your group as well. If you are a support Scourge, you would be giving 100% prot to your party. If you are this DPS Alac Scourge, this would just kind of be helping keep the prot on the party. It's not going to do it all solo. So we've got this gives some barrier, this gives barrier, putting these down gives barrier, and in a pinch, if you use Sand Flare as your heal skill, if you need to, that gives some barrier also. So that means all of those give alacrity. So using those off cooldown, basically always having one shade down, hitting F3 every time it lights up, using this every time it lights up. However, I'll say real quick, Blood is Power. Blood is Power just does a massive bleed on the enemy and a massive dot on you. But then, because, I hit that by accident, ignore that. Because of this trait here, after you enter Shroud, any up to 2 conditions on you are transferred to your enemy. So if I am sitting here, I got no Condis, I use Blood as Power, that puts Condis on both of us, and then I enter Shroud, they go to him. So he gets the Condis meant for him, and he gets the Condis meant for me, which means that this does 21k, and then 7k, and then 9k. It does a lot of damage. So you want to kind of consider these a pair. Every time you can, hit Blood is Power, followed by Sandstorm Shroud. Okay, just like Blood is Power, Sandstorm Shroud. And then the dots on you go to him. Just consider those as a buddy system, all right? So you do that combination whenever you can. You hit F3 whenever you can, but make sure that you always have at least one shade out. And so you're gonna be resummoning a shade every like 5 to 10 seconds. But essentially the way I did it, just to make sure, is anytime I was hitting any other button here, I hit F1 first. Like, oh, my F3's up, F1, F3. Oh, my F2's up, F1, F2. And that's how I stayed on top of it, because you are hitting that a lot. So that takes care of the alacrity. I did try to do it with full Vipers, and it kept falling off. So I followed the build guide that I found, which I believe is on Snowcrows, and I'll put a link to it below the video. We are doing Ritualist right here, which gives us a little bit of concentration. And I was using a food buff. I think I had Ascended food during the strike footage. So I had like 15% boon duration, which is just enough that it wasn't falling off. If you were running full Rit gear, you would sacrifice more damage, but it would be even easier to keep the boon up. But it's not necessary if you can play it decently. Now let's talk about just damage. You want to use Pistol 2 and Pistol 3 whenever you can. Torch 4 and 5 whenever you can. On this side, you want to use Scepter 3 and 2. Prioritize the 3 first because it hits a whole lot harder whenever you can. And again, Torch 4 and 5. For these slots here, if you're on a fight that's really unga bunga and you're just bringing as much damage as possible, put Signet of Spite as one of your buttons and hit it every time it lights up. You notice there is a lot of dots over there. All of those go off when you activate the Signet of Spite. So you just hit it every time you can, and it just gives a whole bunch of presence to your enemy, okay? Plague Lands is your DPS choice. Again, if you're just doing DPS, you just drop this onto the enemy. Make sure your enemy is not moving around when you do this, and it just does a whole lot of dots, just tons and tons of dots. So those are your DPS options if you are not having to bring anything special for the fight. Some other notable things, if you are on a fight that needs CC, you bring Flesh Golem, because it's charged as CC. If you need even more, you could swap out Signet of Smite for Spectral Grasp, which is a pull. If you are on a fight where there are projectiles, you can bring Corrosive Poison Cloud. 20-second cooldown, turns off enemy projectiles for 8 seconds. Very high duration versus the cooldown. On Dagda, I was able to use this every single time that she ported away and started spinning and shooting bullets, because Cosmic Observatory was one of the dailies today. So this was very powerful there. Again, Spectral Grasp is good for pulling mobs together. I used it on Bone Skinner today. Some other things that are noteworthy. Shadow Fiend offers damage and another source of generation of the energy bar over here. And Serpent Siphon, because it gives barrier, it also gives another way of applying a tiny bit of alacrity. It also has Aegis. So if you are really good at using Aegis to block like one-hit kill moves from enemies on your team, maybe you used to play Guardian or something before this, you can do that with this, which is offers you a lot of tricks. Now here, this is a flex slot also. However, I tried it without Signet of Undeath here, and I struggled a little with the energy bar. So by having Signet of Undeath there, it basically becomes a battery. It gives you life force every couple seconds, and then I never had to think about this. It was just super easy mode as far as life force generation. Additionally, you can activate the Signet of Undeath to res somebody. Now, let me respawn this here. The trait right here, Doomfire. I honestly learned something today that I did not know from all my time as support Scourge. This says Shroud Skill 1 inflicts burning on your target. Now your Shroud bar, when you become a Scourge from a core Necromancer, your Shroud bar changes to the Scourge bar. I thought that meant that just Scourge button 1 would inflict fire because of Doomfire. And sure enough, if I manifest a Sandshade here, it immediately starts burning, and you can see that. What I did not know is it also affects every other button on the Scourge bar. So if I hit F2, he's burning. If I hit F3, he's burning. If I hit F4, he's burning. If I hit F5, he is burning. So I don't know if that's a bug that's just been there forever, and I'm just now finding out about it. But despite how this reads, every single button from F1 to F5 will do burning. So anytime your bar is full, if you have these things off cooldown, you should use some of these abilities because they apply conditions. No matter what they do, you know, this is barrier, this is condition cleanse, this is fear, but hitting any of these will do dots, okay? Now, the best bang for your buck is Nefarious Favor. Nefarious Favor takes a very small amount of life force to trigger, 4.5 second cooldown, and it puts all those lovely dots on the enemy. But what's really awesome is it also cleanses a condition from your team. Specifically, it turns it into a boon. It turns it into a buff, which means what we have here is a DPS that is providing alacrity to its team, that is also pumping barriers on its team, and is cleansing conditions from them every 4.5 seconds. That is really cool. That is really, really cool. Like, you know, almost everyone has some kind of condition cleanse on demand. Not everyone has it in their DPS builds. This guy's bringing it to the whole team every 4.5 seconds. And it's part of their DPS rotations. Like, they're not gonna not do that. Like, it's part of their DPS rotation. No matter how greedy they are, they're gonna be hitting that button because it's the most efficient source of damage for this build, and it's gonna be helping the whole team too at the same time. So that is really cool to me. So the total package here, we've got a DPS that does, you know what, I don't think I actually did the sample thing. I usually do a sample just to show I know sort of what I'm talking about. Let's do that now and see what kind of numbers we get. So I am going to reset the Golem. I currently have Might and Fury and Quickness on me from the console, and this has all the usual dots. So we are going to run over here, and I am going to do Plague lands, and do this, and give those dots to him. I'm gonna just give those to you, and Signet of Spite, and Weapon Slot, and do this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And here we go, and redo the Shade. And we're just waiting on cooldowns for a minute, and Blood is Power, and then the Mouse 5, and do this, and Weapon Swap, and recast Shade before I use my Shade skills, just to be absolutely sure that they are energized. And Blood is Power, and then the F5, and then redo those. And hit a few more buttons here. All right, now let's just kind of snapshot this for a moment. We're at 95% Alac uptime, 23k DPS. So the Alac was basically, after a couple of seconds had passed in the fight, I got it up and it never fell off. And we did 23k DPS under perfect conditions. That is fully ranged damage. It is cleaving damage. It is in an area, so if you're fighting multiple targets, you will be hitting them all. It's not a single target projectile, and you are hitting a whole area with it. Additionally, we're pumping barrier on our teammates. Now, during the spiciest fight that I did with testing today, I just did the daily strikes today. We went to Bone Skinner, and on that fight, I was not a support Scourge. I was the DPS Alac Scourge, so I was not doing the usual Scourge things on that fight where I'm pulling the people that make mistakes out of puddles and stuff like that. I was just going ham. At the end of that, I took Signet of Spite off my bar, which lowered my damage, to bring Spectral Grasp to pull in the adds and keep those under control. I took Plague Lands off my bar to bring Flesh Golem to have another huge interrupt for when we needed to CC the boss. So I did my job of doing, I did like 20k damage by the end. I kept Alacrity on the party. I helped keep Might, Fury, and Prot on the party. I was pumping out about 2,000 barrier per second on the party, cleansing them of conditions often, like every 4.5 seconds, pulling in the adds to kill those, doing huge CC on the boss whenever it was needed, and never had any trouble. And I think at one moment I used Signet of Undeath to save somebody's life too. So in the end, there are supports that do Alacrity and then DPS that do more damage than this. There are. But this felt really good to play, and it had a very good measure of control of the situation. So if you like doing damage, but also having a measure of more of control of the group's success, which is, you know, what most of us healers love having. I say us healers because I'm often known as being a main healer support enjoyer. This is really good. Like, you know, you are taking pressure off the healer by your constant small barrier applications, just kind of as like a mechanist would. You are supplying damage. You don't have to stop damage if you're at range. You're constantly curing conditions off your teammate, again, relieving some pressure off of what the healer has to do. And you've got a nice toolbox too. I often say that I think that like Mesmer and Guardian have the best toolbox, and I still believe that, but there is some good stuff here. The AoE pull mobs from all over the room into a central point. The Aegis on Demand is down here. Epidemic still, although it's been nerfed, it still has some uses. CPC, Corrosive Poison Cloud, for just turning off enemy projectiles with a mere 20-second cooldown. Very powerful. So there's a lot of good stuff down here, and yeah, overall, really enjoyed this. I didn't expect to have any problems playing it because I'm used to playing support Scourge. However, it ended up being a little better than I thought. I was a little worried that it would kind of feel like I was wasting my time when I pump weak, no healing power barriers on the group solely for the purpose of giving them Alacrity. However, every button that pumps a barrier on the group also sets the enemy on fire. So it was in the DPS rotation anyway, and it's not like, as for example, DPS Alac Druid has to pump skills that heal and do 0 damage to keep Alac on the party, which is why DPS Alac Druid is a really weird thing and it doesn't super work that well. This does not have that problem. This does not have that same lack of cohesion. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Could I have possibly played it better? Maybe. I played it for about 2 hours. As always, if you've got any questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, or advice about how I did something wrong, you are welcome to put it in the comments down below. I encourage you to do so. This is not a guide. This is just me cataloging my experience as I try every boon support in the game. And I am off to the next one.